What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. It's still Monday, right? Day number 1 of week number 2 of this Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial, aka day 5 of the trial. We finally get to the defense's case in chief. I have some thoughts on the timing and what's going on with that. I see some comments like Paige, the plaintiff team making sure the defense team has no time to adequately put on their case. Judge should not allow that. We will get to those kinds of questions and talk about that topic, as well as all of today's witnesses. We will get through them. We will discuss them. We will recap them. I have a ton to get to, so I don't want to waste a lot of time in the beginning. And I also am probably going to move through these witnesses pretty quickly. We will, of course, answer your questions, but I want to make sure that I play Terry Sanderson's version of the events, like I did for Gwyneth Paltrow, like I've done for other people as they explain how the collision happened. We had animations today. We had bench conferences today. We had masks and colds and coughs and all sorts of stuff going on today, snowstorms, what have you. Another day where the judge shined bright, I think, in the decisions that he's making and the stuff and the way that he says and does certain things. Speaking of coughs, I've got a little cough myself. So we're going to get to all that and more today. I appreciate everybody joining me. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do so. We've gained a couple subscribers from this Paltrow trial. So if you're new here from the Paltrow trial, let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this later. A lot from Utah. Some people messaging me on Instagram and Twitter at Tragos Law if you want to follow me on there, saying they live in the area and the snowstorms are so bad that they can't make it up to the courthouse. So that's why some of the delays in the mornings are happening. But let's get to this trial, okay? Hit that like button if you haven't already, and we'll jump right into it. We've gotten to 8,000 likes. We have never gotten to 10,000 likes on a Paltrow video. Maybe we can get there today. So let's get to it. We started the day with some more argument about the link. That link that's been in the email to the sisters, to the daughters, whatever you want to call them. And what was on it. And it turns out that one of us, I think I can say, watching from the outside world, who find this a little easier than all the lawyers do. And you'd be surprised at how difficult sometimes we lawyers make things. And you all on the outside world with certain expertises and a certain set of skills, as Liam Neeson would say, found out how to get and access this link. And we've got it. And we hear what it is later. And it was hilarious to hear each side argue about the language that they want to have said. And just so you know, if you've ever been on a jury and they take breaks and things like that, but it was so funny to me to hear this back and forth because this happens so many times over trivial issues. But this is what it's like. And it gives you a little window into a lawyer's brain and into how laws are written and into how rules are made and into how case law is developed. That the way they describe how they came into possession of this link, how many back and forths there were, and I think the judge ended up coming out to a flawless conclusion in the way that he explained it. The defense wanted it to be known that they found it. Plaintiff was like, but you didn't find it. The judge is like, yeah, you didn't find it. And he's like, well, I want them to know that. We immediately turned it over to the other side. The judge is like, okay. Plaintiff's like, okay. And they're like, and plaintiff could have had access to this a long time ago because Terry changed the password. And they're like, well, the judge was like, well, I'm pretty sure either one of you guys had access to this. If you would have had somebody that specialized in what this viewer specialized in, you can also absolutely compel, I'll say, a plaintiff to change the password if that's going to allow you to get to a link, which it doesn't seem like they did. P.S. We do have a poll live as to who you think is at fault for the collision. After the evidence and testimony you've heard so far, we'll talk about those results later. And we have another result coming later about damages because we're going to have to get into that eventually. It's kind of a difficult topic to discuss, but I'm really, really interested in what you guys have to say. So, yeah, the argument was they didn't have access to it, Tina, but they had the same access the plaintiff did. And if anybody would have told them to change the password and get the link, they could have. And once we found out what it was, it makes no sense that either side would want to hide this. But at the end of the day, the defense was very worried because the plaintiff let them know, we will argue that in your opening you said, this is probably the most important piece of evidence, this link right here, as he waved around the dollar bill and the link. And he's like, I don't want them to say that, Judge, basically. Owens was like, yeah, I don't want them to say that because there's nothing on it. It's not actually a big deal. It's just the same kind of picture we've already seen. So we get to it, and that's where we're going to start our clips in today's recap, is what the judge did with this. How do you explain getting this piece of information, make it seem fair to both sides, make the jury have no clue what all the lawyers are worried about? Because that's the best kind of judge. We just don't want any juror to think like we were hiding it or they were hiding it, or, we didn't want somebody to see it and they did. We don't want, and we also don't want anything to be misrepresented. Like the plaintiffs could have gotten this, but didn't, and we had no access to it. That's not actually true. They both kind of had access to it. And here's how the judge explains it to a jury. Guess what? We found something new. It's abnormal. It's 2 trials in a row we've covered where new evidence has come in during trial. This is very abnormal.
There is a new piece of evidence in this case. I'm going to tell you about that. A viewer that's been following this trial out of the court and familiar with finding archived website links investigated the link referenced on Defendant's Exhibit 102. That's the Mr. Sanderson email to his daughters on the day of the accident. There's a link at the bottom of that page. Well, this viewer, through their efforts and expertise, through that, we now have a copy of what was linked. And you will receive it. Be an exhibit. It's Plaintiff's Exhibit 44 and Defendant's Exhibit 102. Plaintiff's Exhibit 44. And
so I also thought there was a ton of skipping in the law and crime video today, so we're just gonna have to deal with that. No big deal. First world problems, as they say. No, Grape Crush. In fact, he is just talking about a picture of, I believe, Whitney, or one of the people that helped him that day on the mountain, is what the link actually was. We still have no GoPro. We have confirmation that there's no GoPro. So if the defense has a GoPro that shows who did it, I would have expected them to play it by now. I think it would have been their first piece of evidence and not some reenactment, which we'll get to that animation. But that was how the judge read it. I thought that was impeccable and very fair. First witness of the day, plaintiff recalls Mr. Ramon. Defense whined about it, and there's going to be a lot of that. Defense literally crying about everything. It is so annoying. I am so over him complaining about everything plaintiff's counsel does. And guess what? It's their burden. Y'all knew how much time you had. If you wanted to speed it up, you could have sped it up a million different ways that you didn't speed it up. So they want to call Mr. Ramon. Their case is still open. Guess what? You want to finish the plaintiff's cross later? Guess what? You're leaving the plaintiff's case in chief open. It's a decision you made that you didn't have to make. And I get it. You're working around schedules, which is fine. But if you make that decision and you make that concession, then don't complain about it over and over again. And I think the judge is getting annoyed with it too. Anyways, Mr. Ramon talks about some of the text on the meetup, how quickly after the crash he talked about it, how he did say that Paltrow hit Sanderson, and how you can't make it up. Gwyneth Paltrow hit Terry and took off, stayed at the montage. Her son broke his arm earlier, flew out of the Millionaire Airport. I thought it was kind of weird that he knew all those details. And guess what? So did James as he came up on cross. And he talked about, how did you know that? Why were you talking to so many people about Gwyneth Paltrow? And I thought it did make it look like everybody was real excited that Gwyneth Paltrow, a celebrity, was involved in all of this. And I think that's exactly how it was taken. I think the jury looked at Ramon a little bit of a side eye. But then it was also very weird. I thought that Ramon did not know that Very T was Terry Sanderson. That actually made me believe inadvertently that they actually aren't that close of friends and don't talk that much on this group meetup or whatever. So then Very T himself takes the stand. And I think likability and credibility are of the utmost importance for him in his testimony. And I think in that order, as bad as that may seem at this point, do they like him? Are they going to get behind him to rule in his favor? And are they going to put a number that he feels is fair? So they promise 1 hour, okay? And maybe this is why Owens is doing it, okay? Multiple times they talk about 1 hour. Let me tell you right now, I would never promise that with my client, especially if I thought he was really good and going to win me the case. I would never limit it. I would make the judge limit it because, once again, it's my client is there. It's his day in court. He has the burden of proof. And I get it. They have a counterclaim, which they have already admitted is symbolic for $1. So 50-50 time, that's fine, whatever, we'll make it work. But I'm not limiting the most important part of my case like they did here. And I'll tell you where it really came back to bite him later. So maybe that was Owen's tactic and it worked, but he's continuing to do it even after. He was not in the courtroom last week. And I thought it was an absolutely horrible start to this direct examination when they said, "Did you want to be here?" Well, no, because I wanted my daughters to be able to speak freely and not be uncomfortable for them. And while that's admirable, and it may be in response to some of, now again, maybe some of Owen's annoyances are affecting the plaintiff's strategy, which I think is a horrible idea to react to any of that. But he says that, and I'm thinking to myself, well, why weren't you in for Dr. Goldstein? Why weren't you in for this person, for that person, for this person, for that person? And you were in here for Gwyneth Paltrow, who talked about all your problems too and called you a liar. So that just didn't make any sense to me because you weren't only not in here while your daughters were testifying. And that's how they started it. He skis 2 to 3 times per year, 37 years. He's been doing this or whatever. Doing it a long time, expert skier, whatever. He's 5'5", 162 pounds. More on that later. The meetup group was very important in that time because he didn't know anybody. And he knew not to go down the middle of the banana run because it was so packed with people. So he would stay on the right side. Also because of his vision problem. How well did you know Craig Ramon? Only hung out with Ramon, only hung out with him a few times. So again, plaintiff strategy with him, it feels like they're trying to answer too many questions, which is why focus groups are important. And I like talking to you guys to get what's really important. Because I think what I hear as a viewer watching this case is that slope is so packed, so you better watch out for somebody to hit you. That's what I'm thinking. Inherent risk type of stuff. And then he gets to how this collision happened, and we're going to watch it together here.
So, Terry, take the jury through what happened in this ski collision. Take it from, say, getting off of the lift.
Yes, happy to do that. It was really a very nice day for skiing, and I was really looking forward to it. And of course, Torelli has amazing groomed runs. Found that out right away. And
I said banana. It's bandana run. That's my B. My B.
I'm starting from when you get off.
When you got off of the ski lift.
Gotcha. So I was on a chair with probably 4 people. I think Joanne, Debbie, Craig, and there could have been another person besides myself. And we had already met and discussed going down the right side of that run, or going down the sides. And so I came over the top of the hill and saw that and headed for the right side, and I'll pick it up there. And everyone just kind of dispersed, some more to the right, more to the left. And I remember looking and seeing no one. And generally, beginner runs, people are afraid of the off-piste, of the off-groomers. And so they stay away from that area where the snow is piled up. And off-piste can be a rough ride. If you have to divert and you run out in there, some skiers can't make it through there easy, and it's a lot of bumps. So I went right down the run and started just making nice soft turns and staying within that boundary. It could have been as much as 5 yards wide, but it might have been more like 5 or 6 feet. I can't imagine, I can't remember. Lots of room. And so I'm just skiing easy and paying attention, and all of a sudden in front of me is 2 big signs. I've never seen that big of slow down signs. It seemed like they were 4x8, like a 4x8 sheet of plywood size.
And as we have information to build on later, when Christensen said, oh, he was flying around, and the plaintiff asked the question, well, could he have gotten past him? And I can't remember if plaintiff or defense asked, could he have gotten past him and then slowed down? And then she hit him. Sure, this would be an explanation as to why he slowed down. Except for the fact that Terry and nobody else on his side has said he skied past her and then slowed down.
With great big letters, slow down. I went, whoa, and I'm looking around, and the crowd's about the same as me and speed-wise.
So did you pay attention to the sign?
I did. I mean, I backed off whatever I was doing, and then another big sign, like 10 feet away, the same 4x8 sheet up there, big letters. Well, they're serious. Must be lots of emerging trails down here. So I just backed off, and again, the skiers were on my left. We're all about the same speed. And I could see down where the edge of the run went, it curved around, a tree line came out a little bit, and the run curled around. And I could see about half of the, I don't know if it's Montage or the Empire, about half of that beautiful building. And it was wide open. There was nothing in front of me.
They mentioned the montage again and how you could see it. By the way, I stayed in a montage, not in Utah, and it's amazing. So I agree with him there. But apparently Gwyneth Paltrow stayed there, so they had to mention it multiple times and stuff, and the millionaire row, and they're really trying to play up her celebrity. I mean, he even mentions it here, which again, to me, and I may be overly critical at this point, I'm thinking this guy's obsessed with this case. He's obsessed with this case.
And so I came around that corner, and it takes my breath away to think this is hard because I don't like going through the scene. I just remember everything was great, and then I heard something I've never heard at a ski resort, and that was a blood-curdling scream. Just, I can't do it. It was, and then, boom. And it was like somebody was out of control and going to hit a tree and was going to die. And
so he was saying that she exaggerated her scream for the collision. Not great. And in case you were wondering what Ian thought of this, he just cuts right to it here. Does not find this guy credible. I'm not going to say I thought it was as bad as Ian's comment here. There are some parts that we'll discuss that I find a little more credible than a fraudster, but it wasn't a great start.
That's what I had until I was hit.
That's what was going on in your mind.
Overruled?
That's what's going on in your mind when you hear that scream.
That's instantaneous. Oh my gosh, somebody's out of control, and they're really seriously out of control. Not time for hockey style. I didn't go think about that, but most people could avoid that, I think. Good skiers.
Okay. And on the farm. So you
Overruled. He's overruled.
thank you. So you hear this scream.
Yes.
What happens next?
You know, I got hit in my back so hard, and I'm right at my shoulder blades, and it felt like it was perfectly centered, and the fists and the poles were right there at the bottom of my shoulder blades.
So that's interesting description. First off, I've been wondering how he's going to explain this because of the memory loss and not remembering, and so many people saying he didn't remember how the accident happened. Hit square in the back. Now, when I was listening to this real time, I'm like, that's not really what your expert says, but he does have kind of an explanation for that, so we'll get there. But it's a very vivid memory. The poles and the fist square in the back, exactly how she hit me, which to me doesn't jive with a lot of the other evidence the plaintiff has put up. And you don't want to conflict with your own evidence.
Serious smack. Never been hit that hard, and I'm flying. I'm absolutely flying.
Now, you're not airborne.
Well, all I saw was a whole lot of...
He's not going to agree that he wasn't airborne, which I thought was interesting as well. She's like, you're not airborne, right? Trying to backtrack off of some of the claims that he made in some of the medical records, exaggerations. He's like, actually...
Snow. And I didn't see the sky, but I was flying in that sense. I had no control. And I remember this thinking, okay, you really got to hang on. And then I thought about the crowd on the left, and I thought, I don't know who's wanted over there. And I do not want to get them mixed up in here. And I've heard, that maybe that's not decided about how my ribs really got hurt. I absolutely lurched what little I could off of my skis a little bit more to the right to make sure nobody over here got involved on my left side. And then it was like the ground's coming up, nobody in front of me, just me going to the ground, and you're falling far further than 90 degrees like you fall on the floor. You got that extra. And so it's quite a ways to hit the ground. And I just said, okay, you got to protect your face, and your head. And that's the last thing I remember. It didn't happen. I did glance over and saw just out of the corner of my eye, I could see, not glance over, but I could see somebody going by. And I'm like, okay, they're safe. Last thing I remember.
Very weird to remember that little last detail, but that's the last thing he remembers.
Everything's black.
Did the person who struck you land on top of you?
I wouldn't know that. I absolutely would not know that. I was just surprised. I had no upper body strength enough to be able to catch myself. I had no idea.
Do you remember hitting your head on the ground?
No, that part, no, that's all gone. I just remember my arms collapsing, and that's the last thing I remember.
What's the next thing you remember?
I'm getting an adrenaline rush here, I guess, living this again, just being here present too.
And let me just stop you really quick. You said you're getting an adrenaline rush. Is this something that you enjoy?
Adrenaline rush? Not this
No.
time.
Okay.
Not now.
Very weird. Very weird. She was trying to respond to what he's saying and make sure a jury didn't take that as the right, like that he enjoys this, but it's very weird.
All right. So what's the first thing that you remember? Or the next thing that you remember after you're
yes.
on the ground?
The first remember is everything is still black, like I'm unconscious. But it's like my subconscious is going into protection mode. Like, you better pay attention here and listen to what's being said to you. And all I could recognize was that someone was really angry at me. And it was a man, and it didn't come out clear in the beginning. Couldn't really hear what he was saying, but I just knew he was mad, and he was right right above me, right close to me. And I'm feeling a little afraid. And I tried to move, and I could not move a limb. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move my body. Nothing was responding. Just this message I was getting. And the next thing, it became a little more clear. And I heard him say, "Do you realize that you weren't skiing under the rules? You hit somebody. You hurt somebody."
Okay. So Christensen was yelling at him. Okay. That's what he's saying here. That's what he's describing here. This is why context and the entirety of his testimony is really important, and why rushing it is a bad idea. I have no clue how he would remember this in this detail, especially the way he describes it as like his subconscious remembering and hearing certain parts and not others. He doesn't hear Paltrow yell at him or what she says. And the way he describes his apology, to me, it's tough. I feel like you really got to like him. That's what I'm saying. I feel like you really got to like him and just kind of be on his team and then start believing what he's saying. Because if you're at all critically thinking about this, I think it's easy to pick some of this apart.
And just insistent that I was the bad guy. And that's why I said, this has got to be a husband or boyfriend that's really mad at me. And I sound like a big...
He's trying to say Christensen must be biased because only a husband or boyfriend would yell at me this way of the person that hit me.
Did you know who he was?
I had no idea. No idea. It was just a very angry person trying to bully me into believing something that I didn't think could happen, which I heard a woman's voice, right?
Somebody trying to bully me. Owens has a field day with that.
Again, couldn't move. And about the third time he went through that, and it's getting louder, and I started to understand what he was saying, and he was really insistent that I was doing something wrong and hit somebody. And I remember in desperation, because I couldn't move anything, I couldn't fight. I couldn't fight. Who's going to try? And I tried moving something, and I could move my skis a little bit. I could just feel just below my knee. I could just slide my skis a little bit. And that's an important point. My skis are still on. They're still on. And I'm thinking, I got to placate this guy. He's really mad. If he decided he wanted to jump on me right now, he'd finish me off. I remember saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry."
Okay, now you're
I hated that part. I absolutely hated that part. I hated the acting out. I'm sorry. I hated it. I am not one for the dramatics. I'm not one for reenactments. I'm not one for acting stuff out. We're here at trial. The way you explain this to a jury is with your mouth and with your words, especially when you're a party. So I just say, listen, as loud as I could, which wasn't very loud, I said, "I'm sorry. I wanted to get this guy away from me." So I said I was sorry. Never did I say I hit her. Never did he ask me if I hit her. He had already made up his mind when he showed up. That's basically what I would have preferred my client to say. And this is where, if you want to call it coaching, if he asked me, should I act it out and say like, I'm sorry for like that effect? And I'd be like, no. So I'm not telling him what to say. I'm not telling him how to describe the events. I'm not changing his testimony, but I probably would have been like, no, people don't like that. Generally, people don't like that. Now, I could be wrong, obviously, but Evangeline, I'm not going to a storytelling festival, but I would go to a convincing festival, try to convince people and stuff. I like that. But yeah, I don't love that type of recollection, because it seems like you're trying so hard and giving such detail to make you believe what they're saying. Because maybe just explaining it is not a way that is believable. Maybe that's what you think.
Right.
You're whispering.
I know I am, because that's what I heard. Nothing was coming out. My lips were moving. My tongue was moving. There was nothing coming out of my mouth, and my heart rate went up again.
It looked like what you were mouthing was, "I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And I was just going, I can't believe it. I thought, try again. I'm sorry. Nothing was coming out. And to me, I heard nothing.
When you kind of mumbled, whispered, whatever you want to call it, "I'm sorry," was that you apologizing for causing the accident?
No, absolutely not. I was trying to placate this man in the only defensive manner that I could.
Okay. You talked about the man who was yelling at you. Ms. Paltrow last week admitted that she was kind of cussing you out as well. Do you remember any conversation that you had or anything that she said to you?
Absolutely not. There was one voice that my brain was focused on. Thank God, I guess. And that was self-protection, I guess. I only heard a male voice, a mad, angry male voice. I heard nothing. maybe that happened before I came to that point.
Why? Why? Thank God. Why did that protect you? Because you only heard the male voice. I don't get that. So as we're listening to Terry Sanderson's testimony, 2,500 plus of you have voted, and 64% think Terry Sanderson's at fault for the collision. 13% think Paltrow, and 22% think some mixture of both, which is very interesting to me as he's testifying.
In consciousness.
Were you still on the ground at this time?
Still on the ground, absolutely face down.
How did you end up getting up?
Well, that's a story too, but basically, I heard Craig saying, "Harry, are you okay?"
Now, this is Craig Ramone.
Well, at that point, I didn't identify his voice. Just things were a little strange. And
He just said, I heard Craig say. Craig Marone? Well, actually, I wasn't able to identify his voice. Then why'd you just say Craig? Like, this is the stuff where I'm like, man, come on.
And I heard, "Terry, are you okay?"
And this all goes back to my biggest problem with the plaintiffs and how they're presenting this case as what feels like a catastrophic brain injury, but what most doctors and records and everything is showing is a mild traumatic brain injury, a concussion, not a life-changing and debilitating event, and broken ribs.
And about the third time it hit me, somebody is here to help me. And at that point, an angry man was there. And I said, "Oh my gosh." And I went through and I looked up and I could see Craig standing there above me, 8 or 10 feet. And on his immediate left, my right, was a man in an all green outfit and with a helmet on and ski goggles and, looked good. And I thought, "Oh, he's here to help me, right? He looks like he's from Deer Valley." And so I was going through the things, answering his question about that were my thoughts. Now back to my injuries. Craig is saying, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, my ribs are so sore. There's just this really deep throbbing purple pain here." And then I said, "My vision is swimming with sparks."
Throbbing purple pain? That's kind of weird. But so he describes his ribs hurt him right away, and then he's seeing sparks, stars, whatever with his brain. He starts explaining the 2 injuries that he has right away, of course, and he remembers that he feels them again, which doesn't make sense. I would have rather been like, I shouldn't say I would have rather. What's more believable is if he would have explained it like this. I don't remember anything. Craig kind of helps me up. We start going down. I'm woozy. I cannot recall what I was feeling because he told first ski patrol he was fine. Then 3 minutes later, he's disoriented and his ribs hurt. So eventually he told somebody what the problem was. Like, you don't have to prove that you said it at that moment to prove that you had the injuries. That's a red herring the defense is arguing. Well, he sent the ski patrol away. It's just like a car accident. They're like, they didn't want the ambulance. It's like when they got to the hospital, they had 4 broken ribs and a confirmed concussion, regardless as to whether or not they sent the ambulance away. They still had 4 broken ribs and a concussion. He was injured in this collision. Now, it doesn't prove who was at fault, but it is proven without a doubt, in my opinion, that he suffered a mild concussion and 4 broken ribs. So you don't have to add these details to prove that, but he did. And again, he wants to beef up those damages.
And they were unusual sparks. I'm going, is that my retina? Is that my eyes? And it wasn't a really detachment, a retinal hole or anything. And I'm going, that's my brain. I'm thinking, those sparks on my brain.
And all this time, you're still on the ground.
I'm actually, the next point is that after I tell me about my ears going, my ears are buzzing. Oh, and I said my brain is like it's on Novocaine. And then I realized, oh, I'm not seeing, oh, I missed a spot. And that's where I looked up and couldn't see them and got frightened about that. And
Again, this how he's kind of reenacting it and all this explanation. This wasn't in the medical records. This was not in the report that day. So if he was feeling all of this real time that day, why didn't he tell anybody about all of this? Because I promise you, all the reporting and Whitney Smith, I think is her last name, her testimony would have been very different if he would have said all this that day.
I thought, oh my, what's going on? And then I went like this and happy I could see. So I missed that part. That happened before I started telling him what all is wrong with me, answering his question. And then Craig said to me, because I remember, of course, my brains are a little bit stretched out of place. And I remember him saying, do you know who you are? And what I thought I said was, oh my gosh, I can feel this pathway in my brain. It's going around and trying to figure out who I am. And yes, I know I'm Terry. And Then he said, do you know where you
Do you
are?
think anybody would have not had him checked out that night immediately if he would have described all this? That's the issue with just some hyperbole and some exaggeration. It does not go your way, especially when you have some good and honest experts, which I think he had for the most part. None of them really acted like this was what happened to him on that mountain. To me.
Are. And I said, I know I'm skiing, but I don't know where I am. And that's when the man in green took off. I was kind of noticing that he really wasn't interested in what I had to say. He wasn't asking questions. He was standing there rather stoically, head not moving, goggles on, just resting on his poles and his skis, and was sort of disinterested. But when he skied off, my heart sank because I really thought he was the one person that was there to help me. And
so totally opposite description of what Christensen says later. But this is Terry's perception. This is what Terry says happened. And he's explaining all this stuff and doesn't know who he is. And the Deer Valley guy just kind of skis off. Again, if this was corroborated and Ramon kind of agrees with some of it, if I'm on the jury and I believe this, I hate Deer Valley. I hate Gwyneth Paltrow. They screwed this guy. But that's why it comes back to his likability and credibility.
And I'm laying on the ground with my head downhill, and I couldn't see where he went. So I was really...
Terry, how'd you get up?
The question is how I got up, and that might have been the question in the beginning. But,
Right. How did you get up?
you know,
And he says, points to his brain, as if that's why he forgot a question. I feel like every single witness that's taken the stand has forgotten a question or given a roundabout answer at some point, but they're trying to say this proves he has a brain injury, a permanent brain injury. That's why I did not like setting up this witness as, oh, he's probably going to get angry. He's going to get frustrated. He's going to get confused. He's not going to answer the question directly. I don't love setting that up before a witness takes a stand, and then he tries to play into that part at times.
I realized that I was getting cold, and snow was packed in around me. I was starting to get a little shivery, maybe from a little shockish maybe. And I got to go. I got to get my skis downhill. And I started sliding my skis around and my legs around. I think Craig must have been shell-shocked about this guy leading too. I don't know what he thought, but I remember getting my skis around, and it's so painful every time you have to contract your...
Terry,
Thank you.
how did you get up?
Thank you. That is one of my habits. I just focus. After I got halfway around, a man showed up in front of me.
And you notice how
I thought
it
came
like
from-
happened a lot right now. It didn't happen in the beginning of his testimony. It doesn't really happen at the end. But at this point, while it was happening, they really like kind of played into the, you're not answering my question.
Right. And I don't remember if he said one word to me. He just reached down and grabbed me and jerked me up on my feet, which I was not ready to be up on my feet. My head's swimming. I'm in pain, worried about falling down again and breaking a rib, puncturing a lung. He gets me up, and I'm on the edge of the run, so it's bumpy. It's hard to get my skis under me, and I'm stomping down the snow and trying to get them in a spot. Got my
Like,
poles
this is
wedged.
vivid detail for somebody who doesn't remember anything. And I see a lot of you saying like, he remembers a lot. I agree.
And I think I've got it in stability, and he's gone. And this time, I could see him. I could watch him go all the way down the hill. And I'm standing up with him. Am I feeling safe? No, people are going by, and I'm thinking, I do not want to get hit again.
My understanding is that you and Craig tried to ski down a little ways, but then didn't quite make it too far. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he said, you think you can ski? And I'm thinking, the option is getting left up here, I will try anything. I got to get off here. So yes, he should follow me, and I did. And I don't know how I was skiing. I don't think I was edging. I think I was probably snowplowing. And he finally turned around and said, Terry, stop. You've forgotten how to ski. And of course, it was just, we were trapped, and he said, I got to find help.
Here.
And he disappeared.
What happened when help arrived?
Whitney showed up, and I was so grateful to see someone. And
Now, is that Whitney Smith?
yes, that's her name. Mhm.
And
And he loves her and he talks her up and he's so appreciative of her. So I think she is one of the more important independent witnesses. I don't think Christensen is as important. I think the plaintiff has done a good enough job of kind of painting him as a biased witness that they know is going to be on Paltrow's side. So while I think, we'll get to his testimony, but Whitney Smith, both sides glowing reports of Whitney Smith, which is why I think her testimony was very important.
the jury has seen pictures, and we're going to put another picture up in just a couple minutes. Is she the one in a red jacket that there's a picture of in this case? Do you know?
Easy stuff. And so got in, and I remember Whitney saying to me, now you got to remember these things.
This was huge to me. This was huge. Whitney saying, you got to remember these couple things. I was just talking about this with my mom the other day when we were talking about brain tests and when you go to do these things. And she's like, I always feel like I'm losing my mind when they ask me to remember these 3 things. And we have a friend who has early onset dementia. And they talked about how when he went to the doctor and he was a genius and he couldn't remember the 5 things. And it's funny, this just came out today after we were talking about it this weekend. And he says this, and I'm waiting for at the end of the story him to say, yeah, and I couldn't remember those 3 things, but he did. He remembered the things and passed the brain test with flying colors. That's when I was like, what? I was like, did he even have a concussion? Plaintiffs did a good job rehabbing it, and I still think he did get a concussion that day, but I'm like, what?
She says, I'm going to ask you again later. And she told me that she was from Michigan, moved 5 years before, and started on the ski patrol here 5 years before. She loved her job. Her name was Whitney.
He remembered all this.
That she had a horse named Titan that she wore in the years off. So she told me to remember those things. I'm going, this is a brain test. She's wanting to check if my brain's okay. And from that point on, I quit worrying about myself. I quit worrying about my injuries. It was just like, I'm going to remember this. I do not want to have any brain injuries. And I locked onto that. And
so let me just explain something. I'm not a doctor, at least not a medical one. But in case anybody doesn't know, this is just a quick lesson. The reason people fail these brain tests is not, I can confirm, it is not because they don't try hard enough. It is not because they don't want to remember. They all try hard. They all want to remember, but they can't remember because of something going on in their brain. Okay? So I'm being a little bit sarcastic here, but this is not a good explanation as to why you pass this brain test but do have a severe brain injury. It's not a good explanation, Terry. Come on, man.
nothing else. And later on, she did ask me, and I could repeat it back to her exactly as she told me. And she won the women's downhill in the ski patrol women's competition.
Sounds like you still remember some of these details.
I was so determined to hang on to those facts. Yes.
All right. Once you got down, what type of medical attention did you receive? Still at the ski resort?
Yeah, Whitney is not a paramedic. She's not an EMT.
She actually is an EMT.
Really expect her
I don't know if she was at the time, but she is now, as she testified. She is an EMT, which I thought was interesting.
To have advanced knowledge about neurological testing and triple testing and cranial nerve testing.
I didn't expect her to have advanced knowledge about neurological testing or nerve. It's like, but you realize she gave you a brain test immediately. I just don't love this, man. I was hoping it was going to do better. Again, was Paltrow amazing? No. But did she do a good enough job? I think so. I didn't feel like she was reaching or lying. I didn't think she was overly likable, but I thought she was credible enough. In case you can't tell, I am not loving this. I'm not loving this. There are parts of it where I did feel bad for him as he was explaining some of the stuff, but overall, I just don't think he did a good enough job.
She did a great job of doing exactly what she's supposed to do, just to be at that triage level to decide what kind of care I needed.
Okay, so
just at
what
that
type of care
triage level, just at that triage, he's giving these like slighted comments. It's like, but you didn't even go to the ER that night.
Yet, what type of medical treatment did you get
No
when you got down to the bottom?
No medical treatment. Am I missing something?
Did you get checked out at the Instacare or anybody?
After
Yes.
we left there. Yes.
I love when lawyers have to end up giving the answer and there was no objection. She's like, so did you get any other medical treatment? He's like, no, that was it. She's like, no other? And he's like, am I missing something? She's like, did you go to the Instacare, Terry? So you remember everything about Whitney, but forgetting the Instacare, we're supposed to believe is part of your brain injury? I don't know, man. I'm having a tough time with this one.
I asked Debbie, I said, where can I go and get checked and see what they say? And she said, well, let's stop at the Instacare on the way. So I'd never been there before, but that's where we stopped and went in there.
All right. So you got checked out. When did you learn that it was Gwyneth Paltrow that you were in the collision with? It
was brought up, I think, that the people that came in to the room to check on me that were part of my group, we check in and check out, and which is what I tell them, go ski and go enjoy yourself. And so it came up, and it probably was Craig who said, I heard him say it was Gwyneth Paltrow. And to me, it's like, I'm not into celebrity worship, so I didn't care at that point.
Did you think it was cool? to collide with a celebrity?
Absolutely not. That is not who I am. No.
Do you ever write that? Ever tell
Well, you said it in your depo too, I think.
anybody that?
I don't think it came out in those words, but I don't remember that. But I think I was trying to communicate to my kids. And the reason was because I got calls from friends that knew my kids that heard I got crushed at the ski resort. And so I thought I gotta let my kids know I'm okay. That was my main point. I don't want them to worry about me. I'm okay. And so I started it out, and they said.
So that was the gist, okay, of how the collision happened in Terry Sanderson's own words. Zachary's mama. So this is a good point, and I thought through this as well. And I had a case, and you can read the question on the screen. I had a case recently in trial where we were saying that there was an injury to his neck, and we proved with our experts that you couldn't see the nerve that was injured, but when they did a burning of the nerve, the pain went away. They tested it with a certain test, whatever, and the nerve had like these shooting pains. Well, they bring up one piece of paper in his, thousands of medical records that say he did this nerve conduction study at a chiropractor's office, and it came back as no abnormalities. And so they waved it around in closing, and how none of, our experts could explain why this nerve conduction study was normal. And in rebuttal close, I said, and this is something I would do here as well, if the plaintiffs argue something like this, I would say, because it'd be reversed, obviously, but I would say, members of the jury, and this is what I said in that case, this nerve conduction study that says no abnormalities on it. Okay, well, first let's look at the date. It's very early on in the case. Let's look at who did it. A chiropractor. Nothing against chiropractors, but you heard from neurologists, orthopedic spine surgeons, neurosurgeons throughout this case. Okay? The defense had this piece of paper just ready to wave it in closing. When their own neurospine surgeon was on the stand, did you hear them ask a single question about this no abnormality nerve conduction study? Who better to explain to you how this is the smoking gun in their case than their own paid neurologist who they've paid $1 million to over the last 3 years to testify for them? They didn't ask him one question about this because it doesn't prove anything. And then do you know what else? It would have been a really good tool when they cross-examined our neurologist and our spine surgeon to prove that his nerves were all perfectly fine, which is what they're trying to argue with this piece of paper now in closing. But guess what? Absolutely no expert said that, and they had every opportunity to ask him about it. But what did we talk about? We talked about this test that showed there was nerve damage. We talked about this procedure that solved our client's issue. You get my point. If this was the case, and they knew this is how Terry was going to testify, their experts should have been able to explain that right away you'd pass brain tests with flying colors. But after, it gets much worse, and you can't recall stuff like this. Yet he is still recalling all of it to this day. So when does it kick in? When do you stop recalling the 3 things they tell you in a brain test? It's tough. I think it's tough. Okay. It took a little longer than I was expecting, but that's okay. The I'm famous stuff. Why did you write it? My head was scrambled. Didn't pick my words right. I was trying to joke around a little. So when he screws up something, his head's scrambled, but when he has a brain test, he passes it with flying colors. Then we get to the link, which I thought was one of the most powerful parts of his direct because it was a nothing burger, a picture of Whitney Smith, not the smoking gun the defense tried to act like. He said he thought someone would have GoPro'd it that day because there were so many people on the slope and he had never seen the GoPro. Then we get to the damages. Okay. And let me see if I can find this comment that I really liked that I think Creed may have sent twice. Yes. Peter, do you really see $3 million of TBI in this direct? He has a perfect grasp on every thought process that day. For $3 million, we should see it in the answers. Well, we're going to put up another poll now. And this is going to be at this point, before I dig too much into damages, where you guys feel the damages are in this case. I think I have 0 to 100,000 as a low range damages, 1 to 300,000 because that 300K number has been thrown out a lot. It's kind of mid, 300 to a million maybe, and then $1 million and up. Because I want to see where you guys see the damages, because this is where your client hammers home how this injury, this accident, and these damages, how they affected his life. What was the pain in your ribs like? Explain that to me. What was it like when you tried to sleep and you rolled over onto your front side? Did you get sick at all when you had the broken ribs? What was it like when you coughed? Anybody make you laugh? What was that like when you broke your ribs? Laughing. Picking up your grandkids. What was that like? Did you try to go to the gym? Did you try to ski? Did you try to do any of this stuff? What was it like? You traveled cross country. What was it like sitting on that plane? Sitting in one spot. How did that make your ribs feel? Because you can still sit on a plane. It just may be painful. You can still cough. It just is excruciatingly painful, which they were able to prove and confirm with some of the defense witnesses. Nobody's going to sit here and say 4 broken ribs isn't painful. It's extremely painful. I would have taken 10 minutes on the ribs alone and just the pain and what he was feeling doing that. Then you dig into the concussion and the time period after, and how still once in a while neurons miss and something happens, and it's really frustrating and really annoying. But when you're asking for $3 million, saying this was life-changing, saying basically everything was good before the accident, everything changed and is bad now after the accident, and this is how you describe damages, I'm literally, this is what I dedicate my life to. You guys realize that. So much so that people were calling me biased for the plaintiff early in the case, which I'm not, but I still want you to keep an open mind and not think every plaintiff is a money-hungry, money-snatching snake, because it's not true. There are a lot of absolutely very legitimately injured people, and I actually think Terry Sanderson was injured. And I'm leaning, I mean, I have a lean, but in no way do I think, oh, absolutely, Terry Sanderson ran into Gwyneth Paltrow. No. In fact, I think I still may be on the other side. I'm pretty close right there. I could still be convinced either way, which is not great for the plaintiff when you're done with your case in chief. But my biggest problem is $3 million plus in damages. This he said, she said, I feel like is still a he said, she said, because they both have biased witnesses that kind of explained it their way as well. But I absolutely believe he injured his ribs and his head in this collision, regardless of who caused it. But I dedicate my life to proving that this stuff changes people's lives, and nobody would want this to happen to them. And the non-economic damages that you can't see in the pain and suffering and what people go through is bad. Like these broken ribs, every time you pick up your grandkid to have a pain and you can't pick them up anymore for 6 months or whatever it takes for the pain to go away, that has value to me. But when you barely talk about the broken ribs and you want to talk about this brain injury, and then this is how the damages discussion goes, what are your injuries from the ski accident? Broken ribs, concussion, and some right leg issues. It's the first time we've heard that. His life is completely different than it was, and he's going to end up in a nursing home. Can't ever ski anymore, has balance issues, headaches, lived in an orange chair, but not like that anymore. He can't communicate, he can't connect, and he has personality differences. I'll tell you right now, while he was on the stand, he communicated effectively, and he connected. I think I got where he was going. So maybe at some point you couldn't do that, but to say you still can't do it now and to be able to testify like this, I don't find genuine. He gets lost in conversations, lost his visual memory, can't get places without maps. Me neither. His interaction with family is more difficult. He's desperate to be close to those girls, but something is wrong with him and his communication. They told him they see changes. So let me just tell you, when our clients start out with an explanation like this, because a lot of them do, nobody knows how to really explain how they felt 5, 7 years ago, 2 years ago. It's really hard to go back there and remember. So that's the lawyer's job, is to say, what was this like? And I've had a lot of clients with rib injuries or neck or spine or back or broken bones or shoulders or knees. So I know what questions to bring it out of them. Like, what was it like to go grocery shopping after your knee surgery? What was it like to do this? And you ask them those questions to try to bring out the details of what it was like, not my relationships were affected. Do you know how much that makes the jury feel those moments? Not at all. I felt the moments so much more when Polly was describing her dad's interactions in certain different scenarios than I did while Terry Sanderson himself was explaining his pain and suffering. They're his angels. I'm their protector. I love my girls. Me and Jenny didn't communicate as well. It was hard for me to transition from being her parent or equal adult. I told my girlfriend to run, even though she didn't necessarily agree with that. She didn't sign up for, an old guy with an injured brain, basically. He had anger issues, or he has anger issues, still does fun stuff, but it's not the same. Traveled, would do it by himself sometimes before, but not after. The exhibit, I'm getting old. Well, I just said, I was starting to feel old. That I think has been overblown. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Used to be a handyman. Like, that's it. That was the damages. A couple minutes of, it's worse now than it used to be. What does that make you want to do as a jury? Even if you think she's at fault and he's not. I don't think that really makes you feel for him or feel like his life was really changed. And again, it's one thing for doctors to come up or family members or to read medical records. It's another thing to hear it from the client. Then we get to something that no lawyer loves talking about, a previous lawyer's press conference that they set up. And this was some interesting discussion. And we didn't get to hear the entirety of the cross, but I have a feeling this is going to be a topic for cross. But let's listen to how they handled it. Again, they tried to M&M them and say, I'm going to say everything you can about me before you say it. I don't think it came across too well.
It's just now continuous stuff I don't get done. And I can't tackle because I can't figure it out. It's just goofy. The things that I could do, I was really handy. My dad was a handyman. And I learned and I have the tools. I have an example.
You know what? I would love to hear the example, but I have made a promise.
Go for
So
it.
I want to shift gears.
Let's do it.
Like what? What? That is like, and I don't like to say lawyers are committing malpractice. So I was going to say borderline. It's not borderline malpractice. But when you're asking for millions of dollars of damages and your client wants to give an example of how this affected his life and wants to explain a specific damage, and you have to move on to talk about a press conference? What? Let the man explain to the jury why they are here. Why are we taking time and resources to have this trial? Why are they sitting there for 2 weeks and not going to work? Because he doesn't know how his hands work anymore. He can't hammer a nail. He can't fix the simplest things at his house. He has to call a friend or a handyman to do it. He feels inept. He feels like a burden on everyone in his life because he can't hang a picture on a wall, because he can't walk to the next door neighbor's house. He gets lost. Give some specific examples. Let him. She cuts him off to get to this point that we're about to talk. I wasn't even planning on talking about this. But these are egregious mistakes by plaintiff's lawyers.
At some point, after the ski accident, some time passed, and there was a press conference that was held. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't involved in that. I wasn't even your lawyer at the time. Was the press conference your idea?
Absolutely not.
Do you know why the press conference was held?
Your Honor, is he waiving his attorney-client privilege? Because if he is, I'm going to drive a bus through that.
Talk about an inappropriate speaking objection. And if I was the judge, I'd be like, Mr. Owens, you're not driving a bus through anything. So please sit down and stop making comments like that. Like that's horrible. And somebody else said, which was a very nice comment, you loved Poots dramatics. If you can't see the difference between how Dick Harpootlian tries a case versus Steve Owens, I don't know what to tell you. And I did not love a lot of his ho-hum good old boy stuff, but some of what he did was effective. I don't feel the same way about Owens.
What's the objection, counsel?
He just violated his own attorney-client privilege, whose idea it was.
Objections overruled as to relevance.
what is your understanding as to why a press conference was held?
We understood and we agreed how important it would be.
And hold on. I don't want you
Okay,
to talk about anything that you talked about with your counsel.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you have an understanding why a press conference was held?
Yes. I knew that it was very important to have a video of that particular activity. It would just be convincing and would settle this beyond all doubt.
Like a GoPro.
Exactly like a GoPro. But all the other cameras up there, there had to be somebody. And that's what I knew. In fact, I even looked recently and put up a notice at Deer Valley if anybody had a copy.
After that press conference, did any GoPro videos surface?
No, none.
Have they ever?
No, never.
So now what makes this explanation even better is today also happened to be the day that somebody out there in the world found the link. So it's a lot more plausible that he did do this press conference in order to try to find the GoPro. So that does make a lot more sense. And Ranger fan, it does seem like, yes, he was already trying to gather evidence that Gwyneth Paltrow ran into him. All right, let's play the beginning of Cross here because I thought it was a pretty interesting beginning. And I actually thought Owens did a pretty good job, and his technique of saying, we can bring up the transcript if we want, and Eric Christensen's going to testify later, so we'll see that, did bully Terry Sanderson into agreeing with him because he didn't want to be impeached. And if there's anybody I'm going to test their recollection of what a deposition says or what some other witness is going to say, it's Steve Owens. Because that man has already misrepresented multiple things inadvertently. I'm not saying he's doing it on purpose, but inadvertently had to correct himself on the record through the first week of trial twice. Pretty substantial character issues for the plaintiff as well. So I'm not just going to take his word for it. Show me up on the deposition and let me see if the context is actually correct. But let's listen to how he starts this deposition because, again, I think he impeaches Sanderson's credibility right off the bat.
True.
Honestly, I don't ever remember saying it.
Bring it up,
but
can.
I don't doubt you. I misspeak a lot.
And that's why we wanted that little spot in there. I don't doubt you. I misspeak a lot. That to me feels like he's trying to blame his brain injury when it's convenient for him, but not when it's not. You guys tell me, am I being too hard on him? Because I'm trying not to be. I feel bad for the guy. I absolutely believe he was injured. I think potentially this trial spun out of control. This whole case spun out of control. But I do feel bad for him. But this is tough. This is tough.
Okay, this is page 15, line 5 through 8. So the words "I'm famous," this is my question, seem to say, I think it's cool that I had a collision with a celebrity. Was that your thinking at the time? And your answer was yes, I guess, yes. Now let's go to your weight. You testified today that you were 163 and 5'5", true?
Yes, I did.
And do you agree that at your deposition, you told me you were 175 to 180 and 5'8"? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Qualified, yes.
No, I don't want to qualify.
can't
Did you tell me that?
So
Like I said, how much do you weigh? And you said 175, 80. How much did you weigh? And then you said 5'8". How high are you? How tall are you? 3 inches different, right?
I just found that out. I didn't realize. I've had
Sir,
people telling me that.
You told this jury that at the time of the accident, you were 163 and 5'5". Did you not, like 2 hours ago?
I did, yes. Yes.
But you told me in your deposition years
I thought he said right now he's 5'5", 162. Which again, that's Owen kind of twisting words and Terry agreeing with him. But I thought he said right now, which frankly to me is not important, which Owen also points out that nobody cares what you are right now. What were you 7 years ago? And it also gives Owen an opportunity to get some more degenerative medical problems into evidence.
ago that you were 170 to 180 and 5'8". True?
How many years ago did we do this?
3 years ago.
I've lost a lot of weight. I'm down to my usual weight.
You know we're interested not now in your weight today. We're interested in your weight on the day.
Thank you.
Good point.
I knew where that was
Do you
going.
agree you were 5'8"?
Yes.
Have you shrunk 3 inches?
I couldn't believe it either. I wanted to argue because I think I'm 5'8" yet.
You do have degenerative back disease, and those discs are getting squeezed. Is that why?
I have to say yes. I've always been 5'8.5", and I knew I shrunk a half an inch, but 3, wow.
Mr.
So he gets again his degenerative back disease, which causes his discs to go down. So he's losing inches.
Sanderson, we're trying in counsel, let's not speak on top of one another so
Thank
that
you.
we have a clear, clean record.
You're right. Yes, Your Honor.
When we talked about you being unconscious, and do you agree that someone who's unconscious doesn't have a stopwatch to figure out how long they were actually unconscious?
I agree. That's true.
Everything you've learned was from Craig. after the collision?
No,
Yeah, that's over vague, and that's I'll withdraw it because I agree that's
not everything. It's not everything.
Right.
I think Mr. Owens takes a lot of depositions because he tries a case like he's in a deposition a lot. It's very informal. He's withdrawing questions. He's asking vague questions. He's objecting to himself. He's correcting things on the record, which, again, all of that flies in a deposition, but doesn't feel the same at a trial.
As far as length of unconsciousness, do you agree that you weren't stopwatching yourself?
I have no idea.
And yet you did tell people it varied over time. First a few seconds, then 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. You did that, right? Do you disagree?
Yes, it did vary.
And why did you do that? Why would you say, I don't know, then it's a few seconds, then it's 5 minutes, and then you told your psychiatrist at the VA it was up to 10 minutes long? Why did you change?
I had no idea, and I was searching. I really had no idea, and I was trying to answer. I sometimes make that mistake of guessing, but I really didn't know.
And it was to try to get the attention of the doctor. Do you remember telling me that?
I don't. I don't know how to.
Let's find it.
So he ends up impeaching him, and he did in fact say that it gets the doctor's attention when you say you're out for a longer time. All right, we're going to go a little long tonight. I apologize. I mean, you guys probably are okay with that. I apologize to myself that we're going to go a little long. Okay, then let's finish up through his cross. You call Eric Christensen a bully who yelled in your face. That comes back later. Deer Valley says they are the most customer friendly they could possibly be. It's like, yeah, every place says that. Do you know anybody that says, no, we're not customer friendly at all? You said you weren't here for your daughters. Goldstein, here in the courtroom, but Goldstein said you don't like criticism. He danced a bit with that answer. Whitney came with the toboggan. She asked you what happened. You said you don't remember. You've injured yourself before skiing. Another Owen twist of the words, but he did a good enough job to be like, no, not in a collision. Oh, well, you hurt your knee one time. Very different, but Owen again is trying to paint that picture. You spoke to Deer Valley multiple times, never complained about Christensen. You sued Deer Valley. Okay, so here we're going to get into a couple times where Owen goes into spots he knows he should not, which is horrible. You shouldn't do. You should object to. The plaintiff's lawyer should be more angry about it and asking for sidebars and asking for instructions for Owen not to discuss who he sued anymore, because the judge is sustaining these objections, and not discuss irrelevant injuries or irrelevant comorbidities, which he does later. And I hate that stuff. I hate when you have to worry about the other lawyer being unethical. It makes the job a lot more difficult, and it absolutely creates appellate issues. Then he gets in his relationship, 2 divorces, multiple women you were dating. It's just kind of weird. They talk about a stroke, which Sanderson said was actually corrected. It wasn't a stroke. It was from a migraine, but he did lose some vision in one of his eyes. You had anger management at the VA. Doesn't dispute that. That I thought was big. You had anger management in the past. You've had anger issues. I thought that was important personally. Yeah, and then again, he would be like, well, Christensen's going to testify to that. Christensen's going to testify to that. Totally improper. Object to that. It's like, Judge, is there a question? Him stating as if it's fact that Christensen's going to impeach him is not appropriate impeachment. It's totally improper impeachment, but plaintiff's lawyers didn't object. Then, again, a little twist of the words. Your girlfriend did you say your girlfriend didn't buy into this? And Owens was trying to say, like, buy into that the lawsuit was true. But in reality, Terry was saying she didn't sign up for a decrepit person who had an injury that was, going downhill. She didn't sign up for that. But Owens got it across because at that point, Terry was starting to kind of agree with him. And then I thought Owens had a superb point about, you're absolutely sure about these things, even though you admit you don't know much. You don't have a perfect memory, do you? And he impeaches him. You had vision loss in your left eye. He's like, oh, that's been corrected. It's like, yeah, but after the accident, I thought that was good. Then again, we get into this totally irrelevant stuff. I want to play it just so you can not take my word for it, but like literally the judge cuts him off because he starts talking about these medical conditions.
In recess at this time and return at 1:30.
Oh, this was right before then.
one wasn't adequate. You needed both.
Well,
Objection relevance.
We're going to I can explain if you want, Your Honor, this event.
I notice it doesn't change.
Okay.
It's called
unusual beats.
It's
Okay, here we go. Here's where
not
he gets into the heart
perfect. Do you agree?
palpitations, as if that has
Before
to do
the-
with his brain injury or his broken ribs.
Ski collision.
perfect. Of course, I couldn't agree with the word perfect. No,
Palpitation. You had palpitations. Agreed.
had them most of my life,
Yeah. How many years?
40 years probably.
And what's the lay term for palpitation? Is it just
It's called
unusual beats?
It's just a little out of sync that happens when I'm really tired, or if I've been on the treadmill too long or running too long and hard, then it will get a little funny sync. It's called PCVs.
So your beats off. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but it's nothing.
Yeah.
I notice it doesn't change.
Okay. But you were on two different high blood pressure medications. Does that sound right?
Yes.
And that's because one wasn't adequate.
I don't know
You
why they
needed both.
didn't object to this far sooner, but they let him get into a lot of this prior unrelated health issues because they've talked a lot about it in the trial, frankly.
Objection relevance.
We're going to I can explain if you want, Your Honor, this event.
Later witnesses to which this forms part of their opinion?
Sure, his overall health, yes.
There's no claim that his heartbeat or anything was affected by this accident.
The judge basically sustains the objection because it's not relevant and doesn't have anything to do with this case. Now, if they have an expert to say this does have something to do with the case, then you can bring it up later. Then he pauses it. Okay, so we've got the results of how much money you'd give Terry Sanderson if you found Gwyneth Paltrow to be at fault. 0 to $100,000, 74%. 100 to 300, 17%. 800 to $1 million, 8%, and only 2% of you think it would be over $1 million. So I venture to guess almost nobody thinks it's worth $3 million or anywhere near it, if only 2% of you think it should be over $1 million. All right. So he pauses his cross, and a lot of you had an issue with that. I don't know. I think you got some good shots in. You get to bring him up later, cross him again. You can also impeach him now that these other witnesses actually have testified. You know, Christensen said this or this person said that, which to me, even though he was doing it, was improper at this point because they hadn't testified yet. Then Christensen testifies, been doing this for 40 years. And then there was an animation. Did anybody want to see the animation that you didn't? It was a whole lot of nothing. And I was trying to figure out when they were going to play it in its entirety. But it turns out there was a break in every clip of the animation because while they had the collision in the animation, Christensen admits he didn't actually see the collision. So we only see them kind of skiing beforehand. And then we see them laying on the ground. So we're supposed to be watching these animation through Christensen's eyes. Yeah, people are saying no. Yeah, we don't need to waste time watching that. Because he didn't actually see the collision, which he admits. And he also said at first that Sanderson was on top of Paltrow, which I was like, oh, wow, that's the first I've heard of that. That's like the third person to make such a crucial mistake, which is really important on who landed on top of who. Then he corrected himself and said, no, Paltrow landed on top of Sanderson. Which again, immediately I wrote in my notes, uh-oh, did he just say that? So again, in the illustration as well, I don't see very many skiers out there, but we're supposed to believe it was packed. And he knows exactly, he just happened to be looking at Terry going back and forth very fast and noticed that. I would have been like, how many other people were on that mountain? Okay, what was the guy in the black jacket doing? What was the guy in the yellow jacket doing? What was the kid in the red jacket doing? What was the girl in the pink jacket doing? I would have asked all those questions, but somehow you remember exactly what Terry Sanderson was doing. Because before the collision happened, you had no reason to keep your eyes on Terry Sanderson. He was the only one going back and forth kind of fast on this mountain. Because I think a lot of you liked Eric Christensen. I think, to me, especially on cross, he looked like he was there to try to help Gwyneth Paltrow. Now, is he more unbiased than the parties? Sure. But I put him in the same camp as Ramon. Personally. Oh, here's another thing I hate that Owens does. You were called a bully. Did you ever yell at an unconscious man? Is that not utterly ridiculous? Like, that's not an appropriate question. Were you offended by that? Like, if he's offended, he can say he's offended. But him pointing it out in a basically leading question to me is inappropriate. Now, most judges will let you get away with it, so it's fine that he does it. To me, it's just annoying. Let's see. Oh, he taught Gwyneth Paltrow how to ski safely, and of course, she was skiing perfectly, basically. Proper turns, proper angles, proper speeds. Just of course, she was skiing perfectly and safely. And then Owens is correcting himself with Paltrow, not Paltrow. It's very weird. I don't know if he got like reprimanded for that. They were tangled. I took off their skis, which is an interesting detail. It might not be that important, but if you believe Christensen, now you think Terry's a liar because he said his skis never came off, which I think Ramon said as well. He asked if he was okay, and he said yes. And you didn't say, make sure you say you're okay, or force him to say anything, did you? Or bully him into saying anything? Because that's ridiculous, isn't it? If he was hurt, would that have changed the situation? Yes. This is where I think Deer Valley witnesses did a great job. Because I believe them. I believe Eric and Whitney and the other guy, Graft, that if there was actual serious injuries reported, I do think this whole situation would have been handled differently. He would have been helped down immediately. We've discussed our issues that we've had skiing. He would have helped down immediately. They probably would have called an ambulance. He would have been sent to the ER. They would have done a different kind of an incident report, I think. So I do believe them there. I fully believe them there. If he would have said he was hurt or needs assistance, that would change everything. Was Gwyneth Paltrow reckless or dangerous? As the plaintiff said in opening, absolutely not. She was upset. And then he asked these questions like, when you see somebody run into somebody, who's the person that usually gets mad? Who's the person that usually says sorry? I'd be like, no, Judge, that has nothing to do with this. And that's called common sense. If the jury wants to have that common sense, they can. And talking about how Gwyneth Paltrow was upset and how she screamed at him, to me, for somebody that's there sticking up for and with Gwyneth Paltrow, I think it's understandable that maybe he was angry at Terry Sanderson. I find that being more credible on Terry's side rather than this guy came up and was just super nice. Because if he really just took out Gwyneth Paltrow, it's okay to be like, bro, what were you doing? Are you okay? Like, are you drunk? Yes, they tried to make him an expert at everything. I absolutely felt that way. Okay, then more talk about how great Gwyneth Paltrow was skiing. And then they get to, and this is something I want to play. Sorry, we're going long. But when he gets to read this, I was like, ooh, was that great for the defense. When he gets to read what's on the back of every ski pass, because all of us, I've only skied a couple times in my life. I knew this. Tons of you reached out and told me this and asked me, aren't there waivers or inherent risk type of stuff or warnings when you sign up on your pass, stuff like that? Well, if the jury had those questions, they were answered here.
Are you aware it references the risk of collision with another skier as an inherent risk of skiing?
It is printed on the back of the ticket, yes.
And the pass holder accepts full responsibility for all risks associated with the activities.
As we approach.
Yes.
So they argue about it a little bit, and then he gets to talk about it some more after this.
Pass, okay. I do want you to just reference, what do you understand the risks of skiing to be?
Well, you're dealing with a activity that involves sliding on snow. It covers different conditions, different weather conditions, different times of the season. Conditions can change constantly. You can have a front that can move through, and it can go from a fairly nice day to a super windy day with snow, blowing back and forth. So conditions are changing constantly, and part of what we try to do as ski instructors is to give people enough skills that they can deal with all conditions. And there are times when you have to go in. I mean, there's times where it's just too nasty outside.
So he just kind of explains the inherent risks of skiing, which a lot of us know that exist and have dealt with.
So he talks about all those risks. Do you believe Gwyneth Paltrow was skiing within her ability? Yes. Do you think it's important that not just people's ski ability, but their vision and hearing as to whether or not they should even be on the mountain? Yes, of course, he's an expert again. It was not a heavy impact. It couldn't have been, he said. I don't know how he would know that if he didn't see the impact. And he said Terry was skiing fast. So how was it not a heavy impact? Again, this feels like he's trying to help Gwyneth Paltrow, just to me. I'm not saying everybody has to. He asked some speculative questions, and even Christensen was like, I'd have to speculate to answer that. And then basically Sanderson's at fault. Basically gets into that. I think that's inappropriate for him to say, especially when later the boss says Deer Valley does not have an opinion on that or a position, which I think was the better way. It was a little bit of rough lawyering, in my opinion, today on both sides. Did Moses say, "Mommy, look at me"? I never saw it. Okay, more on that later. I can clearly tell he was the uphill skier from where he was. I only looked away for a few seconds, but you didn't see the collision. I find that so hard to believe that this guy's so sure of what happened when he didn't see the collision. At least Mr. Ramon, if you don't believe him, fine, but at least he told a better lie. He said, I saw the collision and this is how it happened. Christensen saying, I didn't see the collision and this is how it's happening. If I was in the jury room, I would pick apart his testimony. Him and Ramon would basically cancel each other out. I would be weighing, who do I believe, Terry or Gwyneth? That's how I would look at it. And then he tried to say, did you get in his face and yell? And then I said he tried to do the Eminem thing and say what they were going to say, but then an objection was sustained. I don't remember what that last question was. Then on cross, he immediately goes to some impeachment. She said she was hurt. Even Gwyneth Paltrow said she was hurt. So why didn't you do that incident report? Why didn't you call people up if people were saying they were hurt? You said nobody was hurt. Even she said she was hurt. Then he backs off a little bit on the mommy, can you watch me ski? Well, maybe it did happen. I just didn't hear it. The scream was probably after contact was made. How the heck would you know that? You didn't see the collision. This was a horrible line on cross. Do you have a videographic memory? Ugh. He gave Moses a handcrafted piece of pottery that he made. The little details, again, like the skis coming off, they kind of got into some of that. Oh, okay. So here's another thing that I just hated. He's like, oh, have you never yelled in your life? Nobody at Deer Valley ever yells, which again, I don't really believe. But I believed it even less when Christensen said, well, you know, if I raise my voice, I lose it quickly. Come on, man. Coming from somebody who loses their voice pretty easily. Come on, man. That doesn't mean you don't use it. That doesn't mean you don't get loud. That doesn't mean you don't yell. So that's supposed to be kind of some kind of proof that you didn't yell this day. I don't know. To me, it felt like he had a dog in this race or a horse in this race. Okay. And then I thought this was interesting. A little piece across here, just 1 minute, about how he didn't do certain things that he said he would do.
While you're ski instructing, I find that hard to believe. So you didn't see the crash, but you saw injury and soreness, and you didn't get the plaintiff's name, even though Ms. Paltrow may have been hurt. Doesn't that seem like a violation of what you're supposed to do as a ski instructor at Deer Valley?
What I was relying on was the comments of both parties. And both parties...
To me, that just about wipes his testimony clean. Now, you're supposed to do something, there's an injury. Paltrow said there's an injury. You didn't do what you say you're supposed to do. And then you said you made your report just on what people said. And Terry saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry is not I hit her in the back or I ran into her. That's not what I'm sorry means. The jury can take it for that. Sure. The jury can say that. But for him acting like this is absolutely what happened based on that, to me is a bridge too far, as we learned in the Murdoch case.
Said that they were okay. As far as Mr. Sanderson being injured, he had a wonderful opportunity to tell patrol, I am hurt, I need help. But instead he refused help. And
who does that sound like? Whose side does it sound like he's on when he says that? Sanderson had a wonderful opportunity, being sarcastic, to tell patrol he was hurt, and he didn't. But guess what? He actually did. Let's listen to this. And now, are there parts that I find hard to believe with Sanderson? Yes. But this actually made me believe him more that maybe Christensen was yelling at him, which is why he wanted to exit that situation with Christensen, and why just 3 minutes later, he did report injuries and they took him down and evaluated him for 2 hours and then sent him to the Instacare. He was injured. That's why this doesn't jive, this Christian stuff, because Sanderson was injured. Was he at fault? Maybe, but he was injured. And so he's rolling his eyes basically at any injuries at all. So I'd say, so how do you think he broke his ribs? Do you not agree Terry Sanderson broke his ribs in this collision? I would ask him that. Who cares what his answer is? Let him say no. And if he says yes, then you agree he was injured and you did nothing. We can at least agree with that, right?
And had patrol continue on their way. Those are when things like that happen. I made a decision that he was okay, and so once I had his skis on, I put my skis on and I left.
You know, within maybe 3 minutes of you leaving this crash scene, Mr. Sanderson was talking to a ski patroller who actually wrote a report. He said he had sore ribs and disorientation.
Well,
Second,
yes.
there's an objection. Overruled. Asking if the witness knew.
Okay. That may have happened then, but he did not report that to me. And that was after I had asked him. And once again, patrol had asked him.
The mystery patrol that you don't know the name of, right?
I do not know the name, but they know who it is from the log.
Well, we heard from Whitney Smith, and that corroborates exactly what the plaintiff said in cross. So again, I actually thought parts of Christensen made me believe Terry more than listening to Terry himself. I don't think it's going to be enough, but still. Then on redirect, they talk about the text with him and Gwyneth. And then we get to Whitney Smith. And to me, she was the best witness for the defense. A lot of people I heard saying Christensen. I thought Whitney Smith was the best witness for the defense because the plaintiff loved her too. She had a report. She's an EMT. Basically, he was fine. He had some rib pain. He ended up breaking his ribs were broken. He had some disorientation. But that lessened as time went on. She spent 2 hours with him, which was more than usual. She wrote down in the report that he had a similar injury in 2010. And let's look at just this freeze frame, because this is the type of stuff I prefer and I like. When somebody actually remembers what's going on, like Whitney Smith, and then we get to a report like this. Can you guys see this? Where there is a...
Okay, got it.
I think it's the
Hop
next...
there, correct?
Yeah, right here. So right here, where she checks off his injuries. Possible injury, fracture. She checks that off. I would have hit that more on cross. It wasn't really hit. Strain, sprain. That's fine. Broken ribs, baby, from the jump. Locked. Nobody can argue with that, in my opinion. But the head, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but on the bottom right, head, face, none of that is checked. That to me is big for the defense. First person EMT that saw him, no issues with his head. Now, plaintiff counters a little bit later, 829. This is still during defense, but the plaintiff does bring this out, that it does say mild disorientation and rib pain. And on cross, the plaintiff says, so if somebody later diagnosed him with a concussion that specializes in this stuff, you wouldn't argue with that, right? And she says, no, I wouldn't argue with that. She is not somebody that was trying to expand her expertise, act like she's a know-it-all. She was right down the middle. I thought did a great job, but it was also very clear he did not have a severe brain injury and only might have had a concussion. And if other people diagnosed him with it, fine. But he was generally okay outside of possible rib fracture and some rib pain, which she documented appropriately. She kind of got it right. Mild disorientation and rib fracture. On direct, they got into the fact that Ramon didn't come in and say, who hit who or anything like that. Now, here was something I thought was bad for the defense. The worst part of her testimony. At the end, when they started talking Paltrow, and she was asked to do an addendum to her report. To me, that makes me think, yeah, maybe it is a little bit different for a celebrity. On cross, again, we hit a bunch of it. Terry was very appreciative. And then Stephen Graft, I'll get through it quick. Terry wrote a letter how they don't apply the rules fairly to celebs, but he didn't say Christensen yelled at him. He didn't really say anything other than I'm okay. If Sanderson would have yelled at him, if Christensen would have yelled at him, there would have been action taken on behalf of Deer Valley. Celebs are not treated differently. Sometimes they have to deal with, security or whatever. A bad boot gets a report, but not when somebody's injured. I thought that was a good point on cross. The $9K bill must be overflated or inflated. No, we saw it. It was just under $9,000. Is it reasonable to say that he's okay with 4 broken ribs? Yeah, I think it's reasonable. Right before he said broken ribs are incredibly painful. He agrees with that. And then we're going to finish this person's cross tomorrow, so we'll talk about it more then. Then at 9:14, let's just finish off our rewatching time with just a little more complaining done by Mr. Owens.
Oh, and Moses having their deposition transcript read into the evidence. Can we confirm?
Mr. Sykes,
That's correct. As long
Days tomorrow.
the court hasn't made a decision about what?
Oh.
Do I need to make about that?
I'm sorry. Tuesday. Can I give my lineup?
What's the lineup for tomorrow?
McMahon.
Oh, you're giving the lineup. You're giving the lineup. Okay, go ahead.
We're starting with, finish up Mr.
Graff.
with him,
My-
is he available?
My objection to, we're already terribly behind.
Just a minute. Is Mr. Graff in the room here? Maybe you better run out and grab him and make sure he's going to be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. Somebody from the plaintiff side.
So 4 of our witnesses have been thrown off, just to let you know, because we had 7 planned for today.
And
We
that's
can't-
your choice, counsel, to throw them off.
I love it. That's your choice, counsel, and he is absolutely right. Call him tomorrow if you want. If they can't come and you're choosing to move stuff around or do it with deposition transcripts, that's your choice.
So each side gets 50% of the trial time, and you're making a decision about how to allocate that time.
Based on
That's
the
something that I didn't know. Each side gets 50% of the trial time. That's interesting. And it doesn't seem like the judge has not reprimanded. And this is what I'm going to tell you, okay? This judge is incredibly fair. I don't know which side he potentially likes better in this case. And that's exactly how a judge is supposed to be. He has not once reprimanded the plaintiff side for going slow, for delaying, for being unreasonable. They don't go past 5 o'clock. They've had to start late because of snowstorms. I see people in the chat besmirching the plaintiff's side as if they're doing something to delay the trial. I've seen, and been involved in a lot of trials. This is not one where either side, I don't think the defense is being delaying in their tactics either. Dilatory, as we say. I don't think either side is delaying this trial. I just think it's kind of taken a long time. They've got bench conferences. They've objected to a lot of things. They've had some technological difficulties, snowstorms, not long days, started on a Tuesday. So Owens is just complaining to complain. They talk about 2.75 hours, and some people ask about that. I think they're talking about Thursday. They only have 2.75 hours, meaning the judge wanted to be done with closings before lunch, give the jury the charge so they could go and deliberate Thursday afternoon. But we're already at an hour and a half, and I haven't done the rapid fire Q&A. So let's get to that now. Hit that like button if you guys haven't already. And if you're leaving before the Q&A, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. This is the biggest group, 7,600 people in here. So we should be able to get to 10,000 likes by the time tomorrow night's video comes. So hopefully you guys can hit that like button and subscribe to our page if you haven't already. We're on the road to 250 here. Here was Sue's question. 2.75 hours, I don't think is what they have total. There's no way, because there's still 3 days or 2.5 days left. I think they're just talking Thursday was planning on being a half day, but the judge said if we have to give them the case a little later, then we will. I think we're going to have a verdict by Thursday night. I do. The very latest Friday. I'd be shocked if this goes into next week. All right. John, can you explain how much time both sides have left with witnesses in closing? I was confused, but plaintiffs looked bad today. Thanks, my guy. I don't think they've been great throughout the whole trial. Okay. I did not think Terry Sanderson did great today, but I don't think the plaintiff's lawyers looked any worse today than they did any other day. Just one man's opinion. I think both sides have sufficient time to get done what they need to get done. I think the plaintiffs went maybe a half day long, but that includes all the defense's cross. And the plaintiffs have not crossed anybody for a very long time. And they don't have to call Gwyneth Paltrow again. And again, the plaintiff's kind of done, but his cross is what's still going. And I feel like his cross has been long with some of the witnesses, not unreasonably long, but longer than the plaintiff's cross has been for any witness. Caitlin Moore, injury varies. I cartwheeled skiing, got 2 feet in the air, and fell in a 5-foot ravine, head over heels with no injury. Told it's because I stayed loose. I've seen kids fall out of trees and not break any bones. So I agree with you. It varies, but confirmed he got an injury here. Just Juan, I snowboard. It is impossible, in my opinion, for you to hit someone from the back and land on the bottom. I think Paltrow caused the crash and is liable. This is just how the mechanics of this works. That's why I'm leaning this way. Even though I kind of find Paltrow more credible, I'm kind of leaning this way because some other people have pointed out to me. And again, if we were in this jury room, it'd be very helpful for you all with a lot of skiing experience to come to me of how hard it would be for 2 skis to go perfectly in between 2 other skis and ride underneath and hit and fall like that. Or what's more reasonable? She just comes behind him and hits him and lands on top of him. I'm kind of with you on. Chrissy, why would defense even bring this link up? Wouldn't it be better to say nothing and let the jury imagine what the link could have been? Yes, but they did the right thing and disclosed it once they had the answer. John O'Rourke, Whitney was fantastic. What a witness. Wow. I agree with you, John. I agree. Okie, I'm curious as to how you feel about splitting up TS's cross with all of GP's witnesses in between. Would you have done the same thing or just finish and let plaintiff rest their case and start your case? I don't know. I think it could have been fine either way, but I don't hate splitting it up. He could have just stopped and then called him in his case in chief as well. So it doesn't really matter. It's 6 in one, half dozen in the other. But I think calling these witnesses in between may be helpful for them. Marie, why would Gwyneth ask for her attorney's fees when it's covered under her personal liability umbrella policy? Is that what that means? And she probably isn't paying a dime. Also, she seems like a witch. You're allowed to ask for that even if your insurance company pays. I don't know for a fact that they are, but you're still allowed to ask for it because the insurance company would get reimbursed at that point. Kesa Dill of Pickles. I am practicing to sing a Whitney Houston song in mass to a very whitewashed town, and I sometimes become afraid of judgment. Then I think of you and your grace and kindness, Peter. Thank you. If you're singing it in mass, there should not be any judgment. They should all enjoy the beautiful praises, and I hope that's what happened for you. I'll be thinking about you. Let me know how that goes. Penelope, one major thing that stuck out to me. Terry picked up a lady for a ski date on this day. What about his girlfriend, Carlene? I don't think it was a date. I didn't take it as a date. Tori, Terry coming in during GP testimony have me Trevor Summers vibes. Yeah, I don't want to compare him to a murderer, but I made some mention of reminding me of some similar situations we've seen. Why is this trial so laid back as far as rules go? Can you help me understand, Uhtred? Civil and some courts, every judge really is the difference. Deborah, he said, she said, he has a pleasant demeanor. He is an advanced skier. He's not embellishing any more than Gwyneth did, aka the sexual assault on the hill. Okay. Suzanne, regarding Christensen, I am so quiet. People can't hear me. I don't have vocal capacity to yell. I completely understand him. We aren't all loud people. That's fair. Ashley King, Peter, when you lose a case as a plaintiff's lawyer, do you have to pay the experts and take a loss? What happens when there's no retainer? So in these situations, when I have accident cases in state court like this, we never actually have gone to trial and lost. But for the defense side, or if it does happen, then yes, you do have to, you pay the experts before the trial. Before they testify, usually you pay them. So regardless of what happens, you pay them. Now, you can get the cost reimbursed if you win, but if not, yes, you take the loss. That's the contingency. That's the risk that lawyers take. That's why they get, or we get, a big percentage if we win. We also carry those costs for years. Christia, as a defense lawyer, don't y'all prep your clients for trial? Like a mock trial, if a person who's on the stand isn't likable, couldn't we blame the lawyer some? Some, but a lawyer can only prepare and put so much lipstick on a pig. Penelope, Peter, can you give a ballpark estimate on what Sanderson has spent on this lawsuit? It seems like he wasted a lot of money for validation. He's had a lot of experts. I would say, because he's not paying his lawyers out of pocket, somewhere in the $100,000 to $200,000 range would be my guess. 7 years, though, maybe even a little bit more. Channeling the heart, Barbara. I think some guys downplay how they feel. Oh, for sure. Especially if embarrassed. My dad would need to have one leg in the grave before he would go to a doctor and admit he didn't do as much. 100%, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. John, I feel like if GP pays a very minimum fee, it's still a win for GP. Thought versus a $3 million verdict. But I still think Terry's lying. She doesn't feel that way, and that's all that matters, right? It's her money. Sonia, Peter, doesn't he assume some risk of injury when you go ski on a mountain like that? Well, we heard it from Christensen and it's on the back of the ski pass. But if somebody is still doing something negligently and hurts you, you can still sue them personally. But the ski resort can't protect you from all the risk out there. That's who you're waiving the risk against. My cat's name is Karen. Anyone think of these symptoms have to do with simple aging? A lot of people think that, especially the defendants. We'll see if the jury thinks that. Netwoman, he's an optometrist that can no longer see. You just can't make this up. His daughter said that as well. Deborah, why would he want to find the GoPro if he hit Gwyneth? Well, at this point, both sides are going to posture like they want to find the GoPro, of course, right? Oh, I wish we had it. It would show I'm right, because it doesn't exist. I mean, somebody would be a complete liar if they found that GoPro. I wish they would. Deborah, 1, I believe you men could get to places with maps. However, you got to orientate and reach them and read the map. Sarcastic? Not you, Peter. Say it's not true. I like maps. I mean, I started driving basically with phones and stuff that tell me where to go. I did print out some MapQuest, though, back in the day. Stephanie Coker, seriously, Peter, what do you see as the differences between him and Putin Owens? Their styles seem a lot alike to me, but I'm not an attorney. I think they're incredibly different. Incredibly. I don't have time to go into all the reasons, but Putin never corrected the record about misrepresentations he made. Number 1, he didn't I don't know. I'll have to think about it further and go into it maybe on another video. I don't have time tonight, unfortunately. Brooklyn Basement, Pete, tonight I really saw how passionate you are at what you do. Thank you. I am. Anyone who's been hurt would be so lucky to have you fighting in the ring for them. This is an incredible compliment. I really appreciate that, Brooklyn Basement. And guess what? A lot of subscribers who have found themselves in these situations have reached out, and our firm now represents them. So I'm able to extend that, and I do love it. And I only take cases I believe in and believe the client. What is an orange chair? PB&J said. I think that was just like a chair in his house is what he was talking to. Meant to end with, keep them safe. Oh, sorry. I think I put your comment up already. Holly Berry, does it vary by state? My insurance company says not to apologize after an accident due to liability. I mean, every defense and insurance company will say not to do that for sure. A lot of people still do. Lynn, Peter, how binding are the disclaimers on a ski ticket? It's like dropping off shirts at the laundry. It told you to have 30 days to pick up, not binding. So some of it is, some of it's not. Some waivers are, some aren't. It's a totality of the circumstances and a case-by-case basis when you can get around certain waivers. So I can't answer that specifically with these waivers without seeing them. It seems like Utah and people have sent me have specific laws that protect ski resorts. Penelope, Peter, I respectfully disagree. I think Christensen was extremely genuine and told the same story consistently. I think he won the case for Paltrow. I appreciate this, and I guarantee you there are some jurors that agree with you. And that's why I love having all of you guys comment on here. Normie, Owens complains about not having enough time, proceeds to waste time in 1,000 sidebars. And like when the jury's away or before breaks or in the morning, he's always got, like he's talked about the cameras and what's going on with his client and all this stuff a bunch, which I think is appropriate. I don't think is wasting time, but it is taking time. Azam, hi, Peter. Is it possible in this kind of case to have a hung jury? Yes. I said this several times. I'll say it again. I really love your unbiased views in every case you review. Keep up the amazing work. Thank you so much, Azam. And I love having you in the chat. Yes, I think it has to be 75% of them have to agree. So if it's 50-50, it's a hung jury, I believe. Nicholas, they wasted time on Sanderson Cross. Only 2 questions needed. Your expert testified you would lie involuntarily, correct? And he admitted, sometimes I misspeak. So we can't know when you're lying during direct, correct? Nothing further. Oh, I think they have a lot more, but I get your point. What is purple pain, PB&J? You're just here with the color questions, right? I have no idea. EJ, just joining now. We'll be on the rewatch crew. Got my lawyer, member tee in pink. Love it. Thanks, Peter. Looking forward to your take on today. So the new, speaking of the lawyer tee, and I happen to be wearing one tonight, the new merch site, I am told by John, and you can give him some crap if it doesn't happen. By Wednesday, the new merch site will be open, and I'm really looking forward to it. A lot of new stuff, a lot of cool hats. I'm going to be buying a bunch of stuff out of there. So let me know what you guys like when you check out the merch site. Janet stuttered. Lipstick on a pig. You know it. I love that line. Nothing Burger will be on a t-shirt or hat sometime soon. Rashenda. Lipstick on a pig. I laughed out loud for real. See? You guys like it. Chris. After watching so many murder trials, it's a breath of fresh air to watch a civil trial. I agree with you 1,000,000%. At least DP isn't an option. 100% I agree with you. Annalise, The detailed memory of his unconscious. Exactly. I don't know why my brain just locked into that. Dr. Scrolls. GP shouldn't have let this go to trial. This makes her look bad if she wins, and if she loses, she looks worse. I don't think it looks bad if she wins. I disagree. If she loses, it does. Bill S. They landed with their heads uphill. That's consistent with Paltrow's story. So you just believe Christensen, because I think Ramon said they landed with their heads downhill, which is fine if you believe him. Absolutely. That's the point. Weigh the credibility and see who we believe. Crazy Cat Queen. Thank you for advocating for injured folks, Peter, and thank you for helping us understand how the law works. You guys were very touching today with your compliments, so I really, really appreciate that. He reduced his amount to 300K. No, he didn't. Everything I read, 300K is a jurisdictional amount. He said not less than 300K. I know there are tons of media articles out there, but in opening, they asked for 3.2 million. Owens throughout the entire trial has said they're asking for millions. I expect them to ask for millions. I do not see anywhere legitimately that he limited it to 300K, but it is going around the media. Marianne, I feel like impeaching Terry just demonstrated his brain issues better than anything he said, though not the cause of them. Okay. Donald, instructions follow the most dangerous guy. That's why he had his eye on Mr. Sanders. Okay. Instructors, not instructions. All right. That's all I got today. We went long. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed today. It was action-packed. More to it tomorrow. We still have more Sanderson at some point, and we might have more Paltrow. So we got to keep track of this. I'll get on Twitter more. I had a busy day today. I wasn't able to get in the Twitter discussion as much as I would have liked it. Brooklyn Basement said Purple Pain was him faking TBI synesthesia. Interesting. Okay. We'll see if the defendants point that out. All right. Hit that like button on your way out, okay? And subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends if they're following this case to check me out. And if they're not following it, they should. Twitter and Instagram, Tragos Law, all the things. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for joining me. Until tomorrow. Oh, and at some point this week, probably Wednesday, we're going to be posting my reaction to Camille Vasquez's comments on Paltrow and this trial. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.